Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a historical event from 628 CE that is honestly an absolute masterclass in losing the battle to win the war. We're talking about the Treaty of Hudaybiya. It's this incredibly fascinating moment that literally shifted the geopolitical landscape of the early Islamic world forever. Let's get right into it. So here's the big question. Why on earth would a visionary leader agree to a peace deal that his own fiercely loyal followers saw as a total humiliating defeat? It's a paradox that completely baffled Prophet Muhammad's closest companions during an incredibly tense standoff. To really get it, we have to look past human ego and look at the sheer power of strategic foresight. Section 1. A Journey for Peace. To understand this puzzle, we first have to retrace the steps of a journey that began with entirely peaceful intentions. Picture this. It's the 6th year of the migration. The Prophet and about 1,400 Muslims leave their base in Medina. Their goal? Super simple. They just want to perform the Umrah pilgrimage in Mecca. But the ruling Quraysh tribe in Mecca, they are absolutely not having it. They deploy 200 heavily armed cavalrymen, led by the legendary commander, Khalid ibn al-Walid, just to intercept them. So, to dodge an ambush, the Muslims take this really difficult, obscure detour. They finally set up camp at the mostly dry wells of a place called Hudaybiya, right outside the sacred boundaries. And the contrast between the two sides here is just staggering. On one side, you've got 1,400 guys in basic pilgrimage towels, carrying nothing but sheathed travel swords and some sacrificial camels. On the other side, essentially the 7th century equivalent of a heavily armored SWAT team. It's literally a peaceful pilgrimage staring down a massive militarized blockade. Section 2, the tense standoff. So with both sides camped out at a literal crossroads, the diplomatic chess match begins. Now, the Prophet wanted to avoid war at all costs, so he sends a highly respected envoy, Uthman ibn Affan, into Mecca to negotiate their peaceful entry. But the Quraysh end up holding Uthman way longer than anyone anticipated. And you know how it is when diplomacy stalls, rumors start to fly. A terrifying rumor spreads through the Muslim camp like wildfire. Uthman has been assassinated. Suddenly, this peaceful pilgrimage is on the verge of igniting into an all-out bloody conflict. Section 3. The Pledge Under the Tree. Believing their envoy was dead, the mostly unarmed Muslims had to make a swift, life-or-death decision right there in the desert. What they do next is truly remarkable. They gather under a tree and make what history calls the Bay'at al-Ridwan, or the Pledge of the Tree. This one singular moment unites 1,400 individuals into an absolutely unbreakable front overnight. Even though they didn't have heavy weapons or armor, every single person placed their hand over the Prophet's hand, taking a solemn, unwavering vow to fight to the very death to avenge Uthman. This pledge was a massive deal. It carried such profound religious and historical gravity that it was immortalized in the Quran, known ever since as the Pledge of Acceptance. You can imagine the sheer determination radiating from this camp. It sent psychological shockwaves all the way to the Quraysh leadership in Mecca. Section 4. A seemingly unfair treaty. That sheer display of fearlessness actually terrified the Quraysh into finally negotiating, but the resulting terms were a massive shock to the Muslims. Okay, let's look at these terms. First, they secured a 10-year ceasefire. Sounds pretty good, right? Well, listen to the rest of it. The Muslims must return to Medina without performing the Umrah pilgrimage, the very one they just walked 300 miles for. And it gets worse. If anyone from Mecca fled to Medina to join the Muslims, the Prophet had to extradite them back. But if a Muslim from Medina defected to Mecca, the Quraysh didn't have to return them. No way. Finally, all Arab tribes were free to ally with either side. Honestly, it's pretty easy to see why the Muslims felt completely shortchanged by these shockingly one-sided concessions. Why accept such a one-sided and disgraceful deal? This was the exact, highly frustrated question asked by prominent, deeply loyal companions like Umar. They literally could not fathom compromising with the enemy like this when they felt they were so clearly on the side of truth. As a result, morale in the camp just plummeted. And the compromise went even further. It was so extreme that it extended to the physical drafting of the document itself. When they were writing the treaty, the Quraysh negotiator Suhail point-blank refused to allow the official title Messenger of Allah next to Muhammad's name. The companions were outraged. They flat out refused to erase it. So what happens? The Prophet peacefully takes the pen and erases his own title himself, swapping it out for just Muhammad, son of Abdullah. He literally prioritized peace over his own titular recognition. Section 5. Salamah's wise advice. This staggering level of compromise sparked an unprecedented moment of silent rebellion among the 1,400 companions. Here is where things get really tense. After the treaty is signed, the Prophet orders his companions to sacrifice their animals and shave their heads, which is the signal to end their pilgrimage state. He gave the order 3 times, and 3 times the 1,400 companions, the very same people who just swore to die for him, sat completely still. They were just paralyzed by grief and dejection. The Prophet is facing a massive internal crisis of morale here. So what does he do? He retreats to his tent and consults his incredibly insightful wife, Salama. And she gives him this brilliant piece of advice. She says, "You should go out and do not speak to anyone until you slaughter your camel and have your hair cut." This is just a masterclass in emotional intelligence. She knew that in times of deep emotional overload, people need to see action, not hear more words. So the Prophet steps out, slaughters his camel in total silence, and shaves his head. And immediately, the companions snap out of their shock and rush to follow his lead. Crisis averted. Section 6. The strategic masterstroke. By taking her advice, the Prophet broke the deadlock, setting the stage for the true genius of this treaty to finally unfold over the next 2 years. We can think of this as prophetic diplomacy. It's fascinating because modern international relations theory frames this exact event as a flawless execution of strategic foresight. It perfectly illustrates how pragmatic compromise and trust building can transition a really tense, hostile standoff into long-term peaceful coexistence. He prioritized the ultimate geopolitical goal over immediate pride and optics. Let's break down the political dominoes here. Before the treaty, the Meccan Quraysh were openly allied with the heavily fortified Jewish stronghold of Khaybar to the north, basically sandwiching the Muslims. But by securing a 10-year peace with Mecca, the treaty secretly dismantled this massive two-front alliance. Khaybar was instantly isolated. Plus, the Muslims went from being viewed as outlaws and exiles to gaining formal recognition as a legitimate, sovereign state. And remember those neutral Arab tribes? Now they were legally free to openly ally with Medina without fear of Meccan retaliation. Talk about a real game changer. This created a massive domino effect. With their southern flank totally secure from Meccan attacks, the Muslims started systematically neutralizing other threats. Just a month and a half later, they safely marched north and conquered the isolated Khaybar. Seeing this huge shift in the balance of power, other Arab tribes began pouring into Medina to form alliances. The Islamic State grew exponentially during this period of peace, right up until the Quraysh eventually realized their massive political blunder and breached the ceasefire themselves. 10,000. That is the staggering number of Muslims who returned just 2 years later. Remember, there were only 1,400 guys at Hudaybiya. Because of the peace secured by that quote-unquote humiliating treaty, the Muslim ranks swelled to 10,000, and that allowed them to peacefully conquer Mecca without a single major battle. What looked like a totally frustrating defeat to the immediate eye was in reality a brilliant long-term victory. Which brings us to our final takeaway. If true victory often comes from strategic foresight rather than protecting immediate pride, what Trojan horse compromises are we failing to make in our own modern conflicts? I'll leave you with this thought to ponder. How could this model of prophetic diplomacy, choosing calculated concessions over endless ego-driven stalemates, transform the negotiations and conflicts we face today? Thanks for exploring this explainer with me. See you next time.